Welcome to the channel. I know many of you listen to these videos to relax or fall asleep, and I'm really glad you're here. Before we start today's crime stories, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. And if there's any crime story you'd like me to narrate for you, feel free to request it in the comment section. Now let's begin. Story 1. Paul Knowles was born in Orlando, Florida, on April 25, 1946. His parents were Thomas Jefferson Knowles and Bonnie Strickland. His parents did not raise him. From a very young age, Paul lived in foster homes. This means he lived with families who were paid to care for him, not with his own family. He moved between different foster homes during his childhood. As a boy, Paul was often alone. He did not make many friends. He had trouble in school and did not like to follow rules. He felt angry and disconnected from other people. There were no strong adult figures in his life to guide him. This lack of a stable family continued as he grew older. When Paul became a teenager, his behavior got worse. He started getting into small troubles. He would steal things. He would skip school. He began to run away from his foster homes. The authorities noticed he was a troubled youth, but they did not have a specific program to help him change his path. He was just moved from one place to another. At the age of 19, Paul Knowles was sent to jail for the first time. He was convicted of a burglary. This means he broke into a building to steal. This first time in prison was in Florida. Being in prison exposed him to more serious criminals and a harder way of life. He learned more about crime inside the prison walls. In early 1974, Paul was an inmate at Rayford Prison in Florida. This prison is now called Florida State Prison. While he was there, he began to write letters to a woman named Angela Kovic. She lived in San Francisco. Angela was divorced. Through their letters, they became close. Paul and Angela decided to get engaged, which means they planned to get married. Angela believed Paul's stories about his life. She paid money for a lawyer to help him with his legal case. Because of this legal help, Paul was released from prison. As soon as he was free, he bought a plane ticket to California. He flew there to live with Angela. When Paul arrived in San Francisco, he met Angela in person. Very quickly, Angela felt something was wrong. She later said Paul had an aura of fear around him. This means he made her feel scared just by being near her. She was so terrified that she told him she could not marry him. She called off the wedding immediately. Paul was now alone in a city far from Florida. He had no job, no home, and no plans. He later claimed that on the night Angela left him, he killed 3 people on the streets of San Francisco. However, the police never found any proof of these murders. These claims were never verified. After a short time in San Francisco, Paul Knowles returned to Jacksonville, Florida. He had no money and no place to stay. Not long after returning, he got into a fight at a bar. During this fight, he stabbed the bartender. The police arrested him for this crime. He was put in a local jail cell to wait for his court date. While he was in the detention cell, Paul managed to pick the lock. Picking a lock means using a tool to open it without a key. He escaped from the police cell on July 26, 1974. He was now a free man, but also a fugitive wanted by the police. After escaping from the police cell in Jacksonville on July 26, 1974, Paul Knowles needed money and a way to leave the city. That same night, he chose a house at random. He broke into the home of a 65-year-old woman named Alice Curtis. He used force to get inside. Once in the house, he found Alice Curtis and gagged her. A gag is something put in or over a person's mouth to stop them from speaking. He then searched her home for money and valuable items to steal. After taking what he wanted, he stole her car. He left Alice Curtis gagged and tied up. Because she was gagged, she could not breathe properly. She died by choking on the gag. Paul Knowles drove away in her car. With a car now, he could travel longer distances. He drove north from Florida into the state of Georgia. On August 1st, he met a 13-year-old girl named Imogene Sanders. He later claimed he killed her. Her body was found much later. Also on that day, he claimed he kidnapped and killed two young sisters, aged 11 and 7, near Jacksonville. The police never found their bodies and think he might have lied about this crime. The next day, August 2nd, he was in Atlantic Beach, Florida. There he met a 49-year-old woman named Marjorie Howie. He went to her apartment. Inside, he strangled her, which means he killed her by squeezing her neck. After killing her, he stole her television set. He then left the area in the stolen car. He continued to drive to different states. On August 23rd, he was in Musella, Georgia. He forced his way into a home where a 24-year-old woman named Kathy Sue Pierce lived with her 3-year-old son. He strangled Kathy Sue Pierce inside her home. Her young son was there, but Paul Knowles did not hurt the child physically. He left the boy alone in the house with his mother's body and drove away. By early September, he had driven north to Ohio. He was still using Alice Curtis's stolen car. On September 3rd, he met a man named William Bates at a roadside bar. Witnesses saw them together. Later, Paul Knowles took William Bates's car. He left Alice Curtis's old car near the bar. William Bates was reported missing. His body was found in October in some woods. He had been strangled. Now driving William Bates's car, Paul Knowles traveled west. On September 18th, he stopped at a rest area in Nevada. There he met an older couple, Emmett and Lois Johnson, who were camping. He tied them up, killed them, and took their possessions. He left their bodies at the rest stop. He then drove towards Texas. On September 22nd, he met a woman named Eben Charlin Hicks at a rest stop. He attacked her, raped her, and strangled her. He left her body beside a road and drove away in her car. He abandoned William Bates's car at the rest stop. The next day, September 23rd, he was in Alabama. He met a beautician named in Dawson. It is not clear if she went with him by choice or by force. They traveled together for several days. She paid for their food and motel rooms. He later claimed that on September 29th, he killed her and threw her body into the Mississippi River. Her remains were found years later. In mid-October, he drove to Connecticut. On October 16th, he broke into a home where a woman named Karen Wine lived with her 16-year-old daughter, Dawn. He tied them up, raped them, and strangled them both. The only item he took from their house was a tape recorder. 2 days later, in another state, he killed a 53-year-old woman named Doris Hosey by shooting her with a rifle he found in her house. He drove back south to Florida. In late October, he picked up 2 hitchhikers in Key West. A policeman stopped him for a traffic reason. Paul Knowles was driving the car stolen from victim Eben Hicks. The policeman did not know the car was stolen and let him go with a warning. This scare made Paul Knowles nervous. He let the 2 hitchhikers go without hurting them. Around this time, he used the stolen tape recorder to record himself talking about his crimes. He mailed these tapes to a lawyer in Florida. In early November, he was in Georgia again. On November 2nd, he picked up 2 hitchhikers, a man and a woman. He killed both of them and left their bodies in different wooded areas. On November 6th, he met a man named Carswell Carr. The man was friendly and invited Paul Knowles to spend the night at his home. During the night, Paul Knowles stabbed Carswell Carr to death. He also strangled Carr's 15-year-old daughter, Amanda. On November 8th, in Atlanta, he met a British journalist named Sandy Fox. They spent a few days together, but she later said he was a strange person. They parted ways. The next day, he found a female friend of Sandy Fox and tried to force her to have sex with him at gunpoint. She managed to escape and called the police. When officers found him, he showed them a sawed-off shotgun and escaped again. On November 14th, he broke into a house in West Palm Beach, Florida. A disabled woman named Beverly Mabby lived there. He kidnapped Beverly's sister, a 32-year-old woman named Barbara Abel. He stole their car and drove north with Barbara as a prisoner. During the drive, he raped her. After holding her for a day, he let her go unharmed on the side of a road. She was able to get help. On the morning of November 16, 1974, a Florida Highway Patrol trooper named Charles Campbell was on duty. He saw a car driving near Perry, Florida. He ran the car's license plate through his police computer. The computer showed that the car was reported stolen from West Palm Beach. Trooper Campbell turned on his lights and siren to pull the car over. The driver was Paul Knowles, and his prisoner, Barbara Abel, had been released just hours before. Knowles pulled over. When Trooper Campbell approached the car, Knowles suddenly attacked him. He wrestled the officer's gun away and took Trooper Campbell hostage. Knowles then drove away in the police car, with Campbell as his prisoner. A short time later, Knowles used the police car's siren to pull over another driver, a 29-year-old man named James Meyer. Knowles forced both Campbell and Meyer into James Meyer's personal car. He drove them into a wooded area in Georgia. He handcuffed both men to a tree. Then, using Trooper Campbell's own gun, he shot each man in the head at close range. He left their bodies there and drove away in Meyer's car. The police were now searching for the stolen police car. Later that day, a sheriff's deputy in Georgia named Charles Hancock saw a car driving recklessly. He recognized it as the car recently reported stolen from James Meyer. Deputy Hancock tried to pull the car over. Knowles refused to stop, and a high-speed chase began. Other police officers joined the chase. Knowles crashed the stolen car through a police roadblock. The crash injured an officer named Jerry Key. Knowles jumped out of the crashed car and ran into the woods on foot. A massive manhunt began immediately. Police officers, sheriff's deputies, and state agents formed a perimeter around the woods. They used tracking dogs and helicopters to search for him. The search lasted through the night and into the next day. During the chase, a detective shot Knowles in the foot, but he kept running. On the afternoon of November 17th, a 27-year-old man named David Clark was hunting in a remote part of the woods. He was a Vietnam War veteran and was not part of the official search. David Clark saw Knowles walking, injured and tired. Clark pointed his hunting shotgun at Knowles and ordered him to stop. He held Knowles there until two investigators, Paul Robbins and Billy Payne, arrived. They arrested Knowles and handcuffed him. Paul Knowles was taken to a jail in Georgia. He was questioned by police from many states. The tape recordings he had mailed to the lawyer were found. On these tapes, Knowles described many of his crimes in detail. Police also used the stolen cars he left behind to connect him to different crime scenes. They now understood that one man was responsible for a series of murders across the country. The police work involved collecting physical evidence from the cars and the places where bodies were found. While in custody, Knowles agreed to show officers where he had hidden Trooper Campbell's gun. On December 18, 1974, two law enforcement officers, Sheriff Earl Lee and Agent Ronnie Angel, were driving Knowles on a highway. They were taking him to the location where he said the gun was hidden. Knowles was handcuffed in the back seat. During the drive, Knowles somehow managed to grab Sheriff Lee's gun from its holster. A struggle happened inside the moving car. Agent Angel, fearing for the sheriff's life, fired his own gun 3 times into Knowles's chest. Paul Knowles died instantly in the back seat of the car. Because Paul Knowles died, there was never a criminal trial. The investigation into all the murders ended with his death. The police closed the cases based on the evidence they had, which included his taped confessions and the physical links like the stolen cars. The families of the victims were told that the killer had been identified and was dead. For the survivors, like Barbara Abel, life continued. She later wrote a book about her experience. The story of Paul Knowles ended that day on the highway, with no chance for him to hurt anyone else ever again. Story 2. Tiago Enrique Gomez de Rocha was born on February 4th, 1988, in the city of Goiânia, Brazil. From the very beginning, his family life was not complete. He never knew his father, as the man had abandoned the family before Tiago could form any memory of him. This meant Tiago was raised by his mother and his grandparents. The family did not have much money, and their life was simple. As a boy, Tiago experienced things that hurt him deeply. He later stated that when he was a child, a neighbor sexually abused him. He found this very confusing and shameful, but he did not tell anyone about it at the time. This secret caused him pain. When he went to school, other children bullied him. They picked on him, perhaps because he was quiet or seemed different. He did not have many friends, and often felt alone and angry. He also had his first romantic experiences as a teenager, but these relationships ended badly, which he saw as more rejections. His mother began a new relationship with another man. However, this man was almost never around, so Tiago's home life was mostly just him and his mother. He had a younger brother, but this brother grew up, got married, and moved out to live his own life. So in the house, it was just Tiago and his mother. To people in the neighborhood and to his own family, Tiago seemed very shy and quiet. He kept to himself and did not cause trouble. He did not act in a strange or threatening way. He even had a girlfriend, and to her, he seemed like a normal, quiet boyfriend. As an adult, Tiago needed to find work. He did not have advanced education or special skills. He found a job as a security guard. His last job was at a hospital for women and children in Goiânia. He worked in shifts, meaning sometimes he worked days and sometimes nights. His co-workers thought he was normal. He did his job and did not argue or act strangely at work. He had been hired just 2 months before the events that would change his life. He was still in a trial period at the company, which meant the company was still checking to see if he was a good fit for the job. In his personal time, Tiago had habits that were not known to others. He sometimes stole license plates from motorcycles. On one occasion in 2013, he was caught by a security camera stealing a plate from a motorcycle in a supermarket parking lot. Another time, also in 2013, the police stopped him while he was riding a motorcycle that had a stolen license plate. He was arrested right then for having the stolen plate, but he was later released. These were small crimes that did not make the police look at him as a serious danger at that time. His life, from the outside, looked very ordinary. He lived with his mother, went to work, and came home. He felt a lot of inner anger from his past, but he showed a calm face to the world. This was the person everyone knew. The quiet, shy man people knew began another life when he was alone. Tiago later told police his first murder happened in 2011. The victim was a 16-year-old boy named Diego Martin Mendez. Tiago did not know him. He said he killed the boy with a knife. After this, he said he killed 2 more men. He described these men as homosexuals. He said he killed them by strangling them. His method changed based on the type of person he targeted. He began to seek out prostitutes and homeless people. He said he would stab the prostitutes. He would shoot the homeless people with a gun. He stole a revolver from the security company he worked for. This became his main weapon. He also used a motorcycle to travel. To avoid being identified, he would steal license plates from other motorcycles and put them on his own. In late 2013, his pattern changed. He killed a 15-year-old girl in December. After this, he stopped targeting men. He began to target only women, most of them young. He would ride his motorcycle through the city, looking for a woman who was alone. He would drive up to her, shoot her with his revolver, and then drive away quickly. All these attacks happened in Goiânia. He killed many women in a short time. On January 18, 2014, he shot and killed a 14-year-old girl named Barbara Costa. The next day, he killed a 23-year-old woman named Beatriz Mora. On February 3rd, he killed 28-year-old Lillian Mesquita. The attacks continued through the spring. On March 14th, he killed 26-year-old Ana Maria. On April 23rd, he killed 22-year-old Juanessa Felipe. The violence became more frequent. In May and June of 2014, he killed 7 more women. On May 8th, he killed 2 women on the same day. On June 15th, he killed 3 women in one day. He killed 2 more women in July. The last murder he confessed to happened on August 2nd, 2014. The victim was a 14-year-old girl named Ana Lydia Gomez. She was waiting at a bus stop when he shot her and drove away on his motorcycle. Alongside the murders, Tiago also committed robberies to get money. He robbed the same lottery ticket store twice, once in September and once in October of 2014. During these robberies, security cameras filmed him holding his gun. The police were looking for the killer, but they were also looking for the man who robbed these stores. They did not know it was the same person. The police had some clues from earlier incidents, but they did not connect them to the murders at the time. They had a security video from 2013 of Tiago stealing a motorcycle license plate in a supermarket parking lot. He had also been arrested in 2013 for using a motorcycle with a stolen plate, but he was released. These were small crimes that did not make the police look for a serial killer. After the murder of Ana Lydia on August 2nd, a traffic camera took a picture of a black motorcycle speeding near the crime scene. The motorcycle had a stolen license plate. The police had this photo, but with a fake plate, they could not easily find the owner. They began to look through thousands of traffic tickets to find more clues. The police in Goiânia formed a special task force on August 4th, 2014, to find the person killing women in the city. This group had 16 detectives, 30 investigators, and 10 clerks. They started by looking closely at the photo from the traffic camera taken just after the last murder. The motorcycle in the photo was black and had a stolen license plate. Because the plate was stolen, the photo did not tell them who owned the motorcycle. The investigators had to look at nearly 50,000 traffic tickets to find other photos of this motorcycle. During this search, an investigator found the important traffic photo in the system. They also remembered 2 older cases. One was a report from 2013 about a man stealing a motorcycle license plate in a supermarket parking lot, which was caught on the store's security camera. The other was a 2013 arrest of a man named Tiago for riding a motorcycle with a stolen plate. The police pulled Tiago's old file and saw his photo. They also looked at security videos from the lottery store robberies. The man in the robbery videos matched Tiago's height and build. The pieces began to fit together. The police got a warrant to arrest Tiago Enrique Gomez de Rocha. On October 14th, 2014, officers went to his house and arrested him. They took him to the homicide police station for questioning. Inside his house, the police searched and found several important items. They found a revolver. They also found other objects that were later proven to be connected to the crimes. Tiago told the police he had stolen the revolver from the security company where he worked. Under questioning by 8 different detectives, Tiago began to confess. He described his crimes using numbers, calling them victim number 1, victim number 2, and so on. At first, he said he had killed 39 people. 2 days after his arrest, he tried to kill himself in his cell by cutting his wrists with broken glass from a light bulb. Guards found him, and he was taken for medical treatment. His wounds were not life-threatening. The police work then focused on proving his confessions with physical evidence. They sent the revolver to the lab for ballistic testing. The test involves firing the gun and comparing the marks on the bullet to bullets found at crime scenes. A week after his arrest, The lab results proved that the bullets from at least 8 of the murdered women were fired from Tiago's revolver. This was solid scientific proof linking him to those killings. Tiago was moved to a larger prison on October 22nd. After he was settled there, he was questioned again. In this new interview, he changed his story. He said he had killed only 29 people, not 39. The police continued to investigate all the murders he had first mentioned. The court ordered official psychiatric exams. In early February 2015, 2 court-appointed psychiatrists evaluated Tiago. Their report, released later that month, said Tiago was a psychopath. However, they also said he was imputable. This legal term means he understood the difference between right and wrong and could control his actions. Therefore, he was legally responsible for his crimes and could stand trial. The legal process was long because there were many separate murders. He was first tried and convicted for the 2 lottery store robberies in April 2015, receiving a sentence of 12 years and 4 months. His murder trials began in 2016. Each victim had a separate trial in front of a jury. In February 2016, he was found guilty of murdering student Ana Carla Lames da Silva and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. In March 2016, he faced 3 more jury trials for the murders of Juliana Nubia Diaz, Ana Rita de Lima, and Arlete dos Anjos Carvalho. He was found guilty in all 3 trials and received an additional 20-year sentence for each murder. In April 2016, he had 2 more trials. He was convicted of murdering Carla Barbosa de Araujo and sentenced to 22 years. He was also convicted of murdering 14-year-old Barbara Luisa Ribeiro Costa and received a 25-year sentence. These sentences were added to his previous sentences. He would have to serve a very long time in prison, likely for the rest of his life. The many trials provided a measure of justice for the victims' families. Tiago remains in a Brazilian prison, serving the combined sentences for his numerous crimes. Story 3. Carl Francis Werner was born on May 12, 1952, in San Jose, California. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Santa Clara County. His parents were hard-working people. His father had a steady job at a local manufacturing plant, and his mother worked part-time in a store. Carl was their only child. The family lived in a small, tidy house. From the outside, their life seemed normal. However, Carl's parents were often busy with work and their own concerns. They were quiet people who kept to themselves. This meant Carl spent a lot of time alone as a boy. He did not often bring friends home after school, and his parents did not ask him about his social life. Carl attended local public schools. He was a very average student in most subjects. His report cards showed he passed his classes, but he did not stand out. Teachers often wrote that he was quiet and did not participate in class discussions. He was the kind of student who was easily forgotten because he caused no trouble and drew no attention to himself. He had no particular hobbies in sports or music. In his teenage years, Carl's social life did not improve. He did not join any clubs or teams at Oak Grove High School. He did not have a girlfriend. Other students saw him as a loner. He would eat lunch by himself and walk home alone after school. He seemed to exist on the edges of the school's social world, watching others but never joining in. Some students thought he was shy. Others simply never noticed him at all. After graduating from high school, Carl enrolled at San Jose City College. He lived at home with his parents to save money. At college, he continued to keep to himself. He was a commuter student, which means he drove to class and then drove home, not spending extra time on campus. He showed a slightly better ability in mathematics than in other subjects, but he was not a top student. He had no known plans for a specific career. During these years, Carl developed a private habit. He began to collect knives. He bought different kinds of knives from army surplus stores and other shops. He would clean them and sharpen them in his room. He did not show this collection to others or talk about it. It was a solitary activity. To his parents, it seemed like a harmless interest, just another quiet hobby for their quiet son. His daily routine was very regular. He attended his college classes, came home, watched television with his parents, and spent time in his room. On weekends, he sometimes went for long drives alone in his car. He would visit remote parks and rural areas in the hills around Santa Clara County. He told his parents he just enjoyed the scenery and the quiet. They had no reason to question this. This was Carl Werner's life up until his late teenage years and early 20s. He was a young man who seemed to float through life without making waves, connected to very few people, and spending most of his time in his own private world. Carl Werner's solitary drives into the hills of Santa Clara County took on a new purpose. He began to specifically seek out remote areas where young people might go to be alone. He would park his car and walk through the woods, watching. He carried a knife with him during these trips. On August 3, 1969, two girls from his old high school, 14-year-old Deborah Gay Furlong and 15-year-old Kathy Rain Snoozy, went to a hillside in the Almaden Valley for a picnic. This was a known spot for local teenagers. Werner saw them there. He approached them. He was a former classmate, and his quiet, familiar face did not alarm them. He then attacked them with his knife. The attack was very violent and very fast. He stabbed Deborah Furlong more than 100 times. He stabbed Kathy Snoozy more than 200 times. All the wounds were on the upper parts of their bodies. The girls did not have time to fight back or run. They died quickly. Werner then left their bodies there, fully clothed on the hillside. He took his knife and left the area. He drove home. He cleaned the knife and put it away with his collection. Later that evening, other people found the girls' bodies. The police came. They saw the huge number of knife wounds. They looked for evidence, but they found no useful fingerprints or witnesses who saw the attack. For almost 2 years, Werner did not attack anyone else. He continued his normal routine of college and solitary drives. The police had no suspects for the double murder. Then on April 11, 1971, Werner went to Villa Montalvo, a park in Saratoga. He saw 18-year-old Kathy Bilek there. She was alone, reading a book and watching birds near a stream in a wooded part of the park. Werner approached her. Just like with the first two girls, his normal appearance did not cause immediate fear. He then attacked her with a knife. He stabbed her 17 times in the back and 32 times in her chest and stomach. He was careful not to damage her breasts. After killing her, Werner left the park. He did not take the murder weapon with him this time. He left the knife near the scene. Kathy Bilek did not come home that night. Her family called the police. The next day, her father and sheriff's deputies searched the park where she was last seen. Her father found her body. The police saw the knife wounds and quickly connected this crime to the murders of Furlong and Snoozy from 1969. The method was the same, many knife wounds from a sudden attack in a remote place. While investigating at Villa Montalvo, the police talked to a park maintenance man. This man had been working in the park the day before. He had seen Carl Werner there. He knew Werner because Werner visited the park often. The maintenance man told the police that Werner was a little odd and that he knew his name. He gave the name Carl Werner to the deputies. The police now had a specific person to look at. After getting the name from the park maintenance man, the Santa Clara County Sheriff's deputies began to investigate Carl Werner. They discovered he had been a suspect in a previous knife attack on a woman that had never been solved. This made them look at him more closely for the Bilek murder. The police connected the three killings because the method, a sudden, frenzied knife attack in a secluded area, was the same in all cases. The police got a judge to give them a search warrant. This legal document allowed them to search Werner's family home. During this search, they found a knife. Forensic experts examined this knife and compared it to evidence from Kathy Bilek's body and the crime scene. They determined it was the weapon used to kill her. This was the physical proof they needed. Faced with this evidence, Carl Werner was arrested. He was taken to a police station for questioning. After being questioned for some time, Werner confessed. He told the detectives that he had killed Kathy Bilek. He also confessed to the murders of Deborah Furlong and Kathy Snoozy 2 years earlier. He explained how he had seen each of the girls alone and had attacked them. He said he did not know why he did it. He gave a full account of his actions on each of those days. The case went to court. Because Werner had confessed and the police had the murder weapon, there was a trial to determine his punishment, not his guilt. The facts of the 3 murders were presented to the judge and jury. The families of the victims described their loss and pain. The medical examiner explained the extreme violence of the wounds. The defense argued that Werner was mentally ill. However, the court found him legally responsible for his actions. Carl Werner was convicted of 3 counts of murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison. He was sent to the California Medical Facility, a prison in Vacaville that houses inmates needing medical or psychiatric care. He spent the rest of his life there. He never appealed his conviction or was granted parole. He died in prison on May 5, 2015, a week before his 63rd birthday. For the families of Deborah Furlong, Kathy Snoozy, and Kathy Bilek, the capture and confession ended years of fear and uncertainty, but it did not bring their daughters back. They had to live with their loss for the rest of their lives. The case was finally closed. Story 4. Bruce George Peter Lee was born as Peter George Dinsdale in Manchester, England. His mother worked as a sex worker. She was often not able to care for him. Because of this, Peter was placed into the care of the local authority. He grew up in various children's homes. He did not have a stable family life or a permanent home. From a very young age, Peter had significant health problems. He suffered from epilepsy, a condition that causes sudden seizures. He also had a physical condition present from birth called congenital spastic hemiplegia. This condition affected the right side of his body. It caused his right leg to be weak, so he walked with a noticeable limp. His right arm was also affected. He had little control over it, and usually held it bent across his chest. His childhood was spent moving between different care homes. In these homes, he was one of many children without parents. He attended local schools but struggled academically. His health issues and his life in care made it difficult for him to focus on his studies or make lasting friends. He was often seen as a quiet and physically awkward boy. When he became a teenager, he left the care system. As a young adult, he found work where he could. He took simple laboring jobs. These jobs required little skill, but were physically demanding. His limp and his unusable right arm made this work very difficult for him. He lived in Hull, in a region called East Riding of Yorkshire. People in his neighborhood knew him. They saw a man with a limp and a crooked arm who did odd jobs. Many people in the area thought he was simple-minded or slow. They often referred to him by the nickname Daft Peter. He did not have a close social circle. He spent most of his time alone. In 1979, when Peter was an adult, his mother remarried. Her new husband had the surname Lee. That same year, Peter decided to change his own name. He did this through an official legal process called a deed poll. He changed his name from Peter George Dinsdale to Bruce George Peter Lee. He chose Bruce partly because he admired the famous actor and martial artist Bruce Lee. He now went by the name Bruce Lee. Life in Hull continued for Bruce Lee. He lived alone and had few friends. He became fixated on a young woman from his neighborhood named Angelina Hasty. He made repeated romantic advances toward her. She rejected him every time. Lee also had a secret sexual encounter with Angelina's brother, a 15-year-old boy named Charles Hasty. After this encounter, Charles began to threaten Lee. Charles said he would go to the police and report Lee because Charles was under the legal age of consent. To stop him, Charles demanded that Lee give him money. The Hasty family was known in the area. They were considered a problem family by some neighbors and the police. They were involved in petty crime and had ongoing disputes with others. Because of this, many people in the neighborhood did not like them. On the night of December 4th, 1979, Bruce Lee went to the Hasty family's house on Selby Street. He carried a container of paraffin, which is a flammable liquid often used in heaters or lamps. The family inside was asleep. Edith Hasty was there with 4 of her sons, Thomas, Charles, Paul, and Peter. Edith's husband was in prison. Her 3 daughters were staying with relatives that night. Lee poured the paraffin through the letterbox in the front door. He then set the liquid on fire. The fire quickly spread up the door and into the hallway of the house. Lee left the scene. Inside, the family woke to the smell of smoke and the sight of flames. Charles Hasty was in a front bedroom with his mother. He managed to push his mother out of an upstairs window to save her. He then tried to save his younger brothers, Paul and Peter, who were in another bedroom. When he opened their bedroom window, it created a draft. This draft pulled the fire into the room with more force. Charles and his 2 brothers became trapped by the intense flames. Another brother, Thomas, who had a muscle-wasting disease, was in a back bedroom. The fire was less severe there. He managed to escape through a window. Neighbors called the fire department. Firefighters arrived and put out the fire. Charles, Paul, and Peter Hasty were all badly burned. They were taken to a special hospital for burn victims. Charles died that night. Peter died 2 days later. Paul lived for 12 days before he also died from his injuries. Edith Hasty and her son Thomas survived. After the fire, the police set up an investigation office in an old police station on Gordon Street. They began talking to people in the neighborhood. The police were surprised because many people did not seem upset about the deaths of the Hasty boys. This was because the family was not well liked. The police thought the fire might have been set on purpose by someone who wanted revenge on the family. They began looking for an arsonist. Months later, the police received an anonymous phone call. The caller said they had seen 3 people driving away from the direction of Selby Street in a Rover 2000 car on the night of the fire. The police traced this car and decided to interview several people connected to it. Bruce Lee was one of many local teenagers they brought in for routine questioning. The detective in charge, Detective Superintendent Ron Sager, used a specific method. He accused each person he interviewed of starting the fire. He did this hoping the real culprit would confess. When it was Bruce Lee's turn, the method worked. After being accused, Lee confessed. He said, "I didn't mean to kill them." He told the police he poured paraffin through the letterbox and started the fire. He explained his motives. Charles Hasty was blackmailing him for money, and Angelina Hasty had rejected him. He wanted revenge. During more questioning, Lee began to talk about other fires. He confessed to starting 9 more fires in Hull over the previous 7 years. These were all fatal fires. 26 people had died in them altogether. The victims included a 6-month-old baby, a young mother and her 3 small sons, and 11 elderly men in a care home called Wensley Lodge. Dozens more people had been injured in these fires, suffering from burns or smoke inhalation. At the time of these earlier fires, no one suspected arson. Everyone believed they were accidents. Official investigations had concluded they were caused by faulty wiring or other mishaps. Lee told the police he started most of these fires at random because he loved to watch fires. He said he rarely thought about whether people were inside the buildings. Only 3 fires, including the one at the Hasty house, were started against people he knew and had a grudge against. The police then took Lee on a drive around the city of Hull. Lee pointed out the specific buildings where he had started fires. He could not remember exact dates, but his locations matched the places where major fires had happened. To test if Lee was telling the truth, the police also took him to a building where a famous fire had happened, but where someone else had already been convicted of the crime. Lee immediately said he had nothing to do with that fire and had never been there. This made the police believe he was being honest about the fires he did start. After Bruce Lee confessed to the 10 fatal fires, the police began a detailed investigation to check his story. They reviewed the old files for each fire he mentioned. They interviewed survivors and witnesses again. The police and fire experts re-examined the original reports. They found that the causes of those fires had been listed as accidents, like faulty wiring or a dropped cigarette. Now, with Lee's confession pointing to arson, they had to reconsider everything. The evidence was complicated. There was no physical evidence, like fingerprints or specific tools, linking Lee to the old fires. The case relied heavily on his detailed confessions and his ability to correctly identify the locations. Because Lee had learning difficulties and a physical disability, the police were careful to ensure his confessions were given freely and were true. They noted that when they took him to a famous fire location where another person had already been convicted, Lee correctly said he was not involved. This made them more confident he was telling the truth about the others. Lee was officially charged with 26 counts of murder and 11 counts of arson. He was taken to court. On January 20th, 1981, at Leeds Crown Court, Lee pleaded not guilty to murder. Instead, he pleaded guilty to 26 counts of manslaughter. His lawyers argued he had diminished responsibility. This is a legal term meaning a person's mental state reduces their blame for a crime. He also pleaded guilty to 11 counts of arson. The prosecutors accepted these pleas. They decided it was not in the public interest to have a long and expensive trial when Lee was admitting to the crimes. The judge agreed. Therefore, there was no full jury trial. The court moved directly to sentencing. Based on medical reports about his mental state, Bruce Lee was not sent to a normal prison. The judge decided he needed hospital treatment. He was given a hospital order. This meant he would be held indefinitely in a secure psychiatric hospital. He was first sent to Park Lane Special Hospital in Liverpool. Later, he was transferred to Rampton Secure Hospital. He would stay there until doctors decided he was no longer a danger to the public. After the sentencing, there were further investigations. A public inquiry was held to look at the fire at Wensley Lodge, where 11 elderly men had died. In 1983, this inquiry concluded that the fire was actually an accident caused by an electrical fault. It stated that Bruce Lee could not have been responsible. Because of this new evidence, Lee's convictions for the 11 deaths at Wensley Lodge were quashed or overturned on appeal. This reduced the number of manslaughter convictions against him from 26 to 15. In the late 1980s, Lee, who had changed his name again to Peter Tredget, began to say he was innocent. He said he had falsely confessed to all the fires. He argued that his mental health problems and his desire for attention led him to confess to crimes he did not commit. He also pointed out that his physical disabilities would have made it very hard for him to start some of the fires. This led to a long review of his case. In 2021, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, a body that investigates possible miscarriages of justice, referred his case back to the Court of Appeal. In 2022, the Court of Appeal examined the evidence again. The judges agreed that for 2 of the fires, including one where a mother and her 3 sons died, Peter Tredget, formerly Lee, could not have been physically responsible due to his disabilities. They acquitted him of 2 arson charges and 3 related manslaughter charges. However, the court upheld his remaining convictions, including for the hasty fire, finding his original confessions for those crimes were reliable. Regarding the people affected, Edith Hasty and her surviving children had to rebuild their lives after the fire. The other victims' families learned that the fires they thought were tragedies were actually crimes. The police officer who led the investigation, Detective Superintendent Ron Sager, retired. He had to take legal action against a newspaper that suggested he had pressured Lee into confessing. He won an apology. Mr. Sager always believed in the truth of Lee's confessions for the main crimes, and he died in 2010. Peter Tredget remains detained under his hospital order, having been convicted of multiple acts of manslaughter and arson. The legal process finally concluded with the 2022 appeal, which confirmed some of his guilt while recognizing he was not responsible for all the deaths to which he had once confessed. Story 5. Anatoly Onoprienko was born on July 25, 1959, in a small village called Lasky in the Zhytomyr region of Ukraine. This area was part of the Soviet Union at the time. His father, Yuri, was a military man who had received awards for his service during World War II. Anatoly had one sibling, an older brother named Valentin, who was already 13 years old when Anatoly was born. When Anatoly was just 4 years old, his mother died. This event changed his life completely. His father was left alone to care for two sons. Yuri Onoprienko found this situation very difficult. He decided he could not raise young Anatoly by himself. First, Anatoly was sent to live with his grandparents and an aunt for a short period. This arrangement did not last. Soon after, his family made the decision to send him to a state orphanage. The orphanage was located in a different area, in a village called Privitin. Anatoly's older brother, Valentin, did not go to the orphanage. Valentin remained with their father. Anatoly later said he felt deep resentment and confusion about this. He did not understand why he was the one sent away while his brother stayed with their father. He felt abandoned and unwanted by his own family. This feeling stayed with him as he grew up in the orphanage system. Life in the orphanage was strict and impersonal. He was one of many children without parents. The caregivers provided basic needs like food and shelter, but there was little personal attention or affection. Anatoly learned to rely only on himself. He did not form close friendships with the other children. He became a quiet and observant boy, often keeping to himself. He later stated that he believed children from orphanages were more likely to end up in trouble, and he felt his path was already set because of his early life. After finishing his basic schooling at the orphanage, he had to leave. He was sent to a technical boarding school. This type of school taught young people a trade so they could get a job. He learned practical skills but did not excel academically. During these teenage years, he continued to be a solitary person. He did not have a circle of friends or mentors to guide him. As a young adult, he was required to join the Soviet Army. This is something most young men in the Soviet Union had to do at the time. His service in the army was unremarkable. He followed orders and completed his term without major problems or promotions. The army did not change his isolated nature. After finishing his military service, he had to find a place to live and a job. He moved around different regions of Ukraine, doing various short-term labor jobs. He worked on farms and in factories. He never stayed in one job or one town for very long. He tried to have a normal personal life. He met a woman and they got married. The couple had a son. However, Anatoly could not hold a steady job or provide a stable home. He argued with his wife frequently. The marriage did not last and they separated. After the separation, he saw his son very rarely. He lived a drifting life, moving from one temporary place to another, without a real home or family connections. His social life was almost non-existent. He spent most of his time alone thinking. His habits involved walking for long hours by himself in forests and rural areas. His life of drifting and isolation continued for years. In 1989, Anatoly was 30 years old. He was living in western Ukraine and had formed a casual friendship with a man named Sergei Rogozin. Neither had steady work. They discussed ways to get money easily. They decided to rob a remote house, thinking the occupants would have savings. They armed themselves with a shotgun and a rifle, later saying they carried the weapons for self-defense. Their first crime happened in 1989. They found a large, isolated house in the village of Bratkovichi. They believed the family inside had wealth. Late at night, they broke into the home. The family inside was large, a husband, wife, and their 8 children. A confrontation happened. Fearing they would be identified, Anatoly and Sergei used their guns. They shot and killed all 10 people. They took some valuables and left. After this, Anatoly felt horrified by his own actions and by his accomplice. He cut all contact with Sergei Rogozin and moved to a different area alone. Later the same year, still in 1989, he was traveling at night. He saw a car parked by the side of a road in a forest. He approached, planning to steal from the vehicle. Inside, 5 people were sleeping, 2 men, 2 women, and an 11-year-old boy. He tried to open the car door quietly, but it made a noise. One of the sleepers stirred and woke up. Startled and afraid of being caught, Anatoly fired his gun through the car window. He kept shooting until everyone inside was dead. To hide the evidence, he poured gasoline on the car and set it on fire with the bodies inside. He later said he had only meant to rob the car, but the situation escalated quickly. For the next several years, he did not commit any known murders. He moved frequently, lived alone, and worked odd jobs. This changed suddenly in December 1995. He was now living in central Ukraine and had acquired a sawn-off double-barreled hunting shotgun. On the night of December 24th, he targeted a house in the village of Garmarnia. The Zychenko family of 4 was inside. He used a trick to get them to open the door, possibly by pretending to need help. Once the door was open, he shot the father first. He then found and shot the mother and their 2 children. He took money and some items from the house. Before leaving, he set the house on fire to destroy evidence. He did not stop. On January 2nd, 1996, he went to a house in the village of Novaya Kotelnya. He killed a family of 4 there with his shotgun. As he was leaving the area on foot, a local man was walking nearby. This man had seen Anatoly. To eliminate this witness, Anatoly shot and killed the pedestrian. His method became consistent. He would choose isolated homes in rural villages. He would often kill the adult man first, then the woman, then any children. He used his sawn-off shotgun at close range. He would take money, jewelry, or sometimes just food. After the killings, he frequently set the building on fire. He also began to kill any stranger who saw him near a crime scene. On January 6, 1996, he was on the Berdyansk-Dniprovsk highway. He wanted a car. He stood by the road and waved to stop vehicles. When a car stopped, he would shoot the driver. He did this 3 separate times that day, killing 4 people in total and stealing their cars. He would drive a stolen car for a while, then abandon it and continue on foot. On January 17th, he attacked the pilot family in the village of Ostrovets. He killed all 5 family members in their home and set it on fire. After this, as he was walking away, he encountered 2 more people, a railway worker and a pedestrian. He shot and killed both, considering them potential witnesses. The killings continued every few weeks. On January 30th in Fastiv, he killed a woman, her 2 sons, and a visiting friend in their apartment. On February 19th in Olovsk, he killed the Dubchak family. Here, after his shotgun failed, he used a hammer to kill the mother and daughter. A week later, on February 27th in Malin, he killed the Bodnarchuk family. After shooting the parents, he used an axe to kill their 2 young daughters. An hour later, a neighbor came to check on the property. Anatoly shot him and also used the axe on his body. His final crime was on March 22, 1996, in the village of Shevchenko. He killed the Novosad family, a father, mother, and 2 children, in their home. He set the house on fire and fled. By now, the police across several regions of Ukraine were aware a serial killer was active. They found patterns in the brutal methods and the setting of fires. They began a large but disorganized search, but they did not have a name or a clear description of the killer. The police investigation was struggling. Different police departments in different regions were investigating separate murders. They did not immediately connect all the crimes to one person. However, the similar methods, shootings followed by arson in rural homes, eventually led them to believe a single serial killer was active. A special investigative group was formed. In March 1996, this group made a serious error. They arrested a 26-year-old man named Yuri Mozola, who was from one of the affected areas. The officers from the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, who interrogated him were determined to get a confession. They tortured Mozola for 3 days. Mozola never confessed. He died from the injuries caused by the torture. Later, 7 officers involved were sentenced to prison for his death. This mistake wasted time and meant the real killer was still free. The break in the case came from a different direction. In early April 1996, Anatoly Onoprienko was staying with a distant relative in the city of Zhytomyr. He had a large bag with him. The relative became suspicious of the bag and looked inside it. The relative saw many weapons, including a sawn-off shotgun, and also some jewelry and other personal items. The relative realized this was very dangerous and told Anatoly he had to leave immediately. After Onoprienko left, the relative contacted the police. The relative reported the suspicious bag full of weapons and gave the police Anatoly's name. This was the first time the investigation had a specific suspect. The police now knew who they were looking for. They launched a massive manhunt, broadcasting his description and name. Onoprienko, now without his weapons and knowing the police were looking for him, tried to hide in the forests. He was cold and hungry. On April 16, 1996, a police patrol was checking a wooded area near the village of Grodzivo. They saw a man who matched the description, looking disheveled and tired. The man was Anatoly Onoprienko. The officers approached and arrested him without a fight. He was exhausted and offered no resistance. When police searched him and the places he had been, they found evidence linking him directly to the crimes. They recovered his bag from his relative's home. The sawn-off shotgun matched ballistic evidence from many murder scenes. The jewelry and other items in the bag were identified as belongings taken from the victims. Under questioning, Onoprienko first confessed to 8 murders. As detectives confronted him with more evidence from different crime scenes, he eventually confessed to killing 52 people. He explained his methods of choosing isolated homes, killing witnesses, and setting fires. He gave details that only the killer would know. He told the police that he heard voices in his head that commanded him to kill. Psychiatric exams were done, but he was found to be legally sane and responsible for his actions. His trial began in 1998. It was held in Zhytomyr and lasted for many months. The court heard detailed evidence from survivors of attacks he described, from ballistic experts, and from investigators. The evidence was overwhelming. In 1999, the judge found him guilty of all 52 murders and sentenced him to death by firing squad. However, Ukraine had made an international agreement when it joined the Council of Europe in 1995. This agreement required Ukraine to stop using the death penalty. Therefore, Onoprienko's sentence was automatically changed to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. He was sent to a special prison for dangerous criminals in Zhytomyr. He spent the rest of his life in a single prison cell. He was allowed out for only 1 hour each day for exercise in a small, enclosed yard. He had no contact with other prisoners. He wrote letters and gave interviews, often repeating his claims about voices and blaming his childhood for his actions. The families of his victims continued with their lives, carrying the loss and trauma of his attacks. Anatoly Onoprienko remained in prison until August 27, 2013, when he died at the age of 54 from heart failure, bringing a final end to his story. Story 6. Carl Eugene Watts was born on November 7, 1953, in Killeen, Texas. His father, Richard, was a soldier in the United States Army. His mother, Dorothy, was a kindergarten art teacher. 3 days after Carl's birth, the family moved to Colwood, West Virginia, which was his mother's hometown. A year later, his sister Sharon was born. When Carl was less than 2 years old, his parents divorced. His father was no longer part of his life. Carl's mother raised him and his sister as a single parent. In 1962, when Carl was 8, his mother married a mechanic named Norman Caesar. The family then moved to Inkster, Michigan. Carl did not like his stepfather. He felt he was competing for his mother's attention and found it hard to adapt to the new family. Carl enjoyed visiting his grandparents back in West Virginia. His grandfather taught him how to hunt and skin rabbits. Carl liked this activity. He felt a strong connection to Colwood and later used the southern pronunciation of his name, Coral, as a nickname because of it. When he was 8 years old, Carl and his sister became very ill with meningitis. They were taken to a hospital in Detroit. Carl was very sick with a high fever. Doctors were worried the fever might have damaged his brain. After he recovered, his family noticed a change in his personality. He became very quiet and withdrawn. He did not want to be around people. His schoolwork suffered after the illness. He had to repeat a grade. Around this time, he also began having violent dreams. In these dreams, he fought and killed women who he believed had evil spirits. He told people later that these dreams did not upset him. He said he enjoyed them and felt better after having one. By the age of 12, Carl began to enjoy thoughts of hurting girls and young women. As a teenager, he started following girls. On June 29, 1969, when he was 15, he was delivering newspapers. He knocked on the door of a 26-year-old woman named Joan Gave. When she answered, he attacked her violently. He then continued delivering his papers. The woman called the police, who arrested Carl at his home. The court ordered Carl to get psychiatric treatment at a clinic in Detroit. Doctors there tested his intelligence. They found he had a low IQ score of 75. They said he had a delusional way of thinking, but was not psychotic. One doctor wrote that Carl was an impulsive person struggling to control strong urges to kill. The doctor believed he was a danger to society. Carl was released from the clinic on his 16th birthday. He returned for outpatient treatment a few times over the next few years. During these treatments, he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Carl graduated from high school in 1973 at age 19. His grades were poor, and he sometimes used drugs. However, he was good at sports. He received a football scholarship to a college in Tennessee. He was also a successful boxer. He was expelled from the college after only 3 months. He was accused of following and attacking women on campus. There were also suspicions he was involved in a female student's death, but there was not enough proof. After his expulsion, he lived briefly in Texas and then returned to Michigan to work in a factory. In 1974, Carl enrolled at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. After enrolling at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo in 1974, Carl Eugene Watts began a series of violent attacks. His first confirmed crime that year was on October 25th. He knocked on the apartment door of a 23-year-old woman named Lenore Nizaki. When she asked who was there, he asked for a person named Charles. This was a name he would use often. When she said no one by that name lived there, she offered to take a note. She undid the chain on her door to get paper. Watts then forced his way in and choked her until she lost consciousness. He left her apartment. She later woke up and called the police, but they could not find her attacker. 5 days later, on October 30th, Watts committed his first confirmed murder. He went to an apartment building near the university. A 20-year-old student named Gloria Steele lived there. Watts tortured her and then killed her. She died from a crushed windpipe and 33 stab wounds to her chest. Later that same day, Watts was still in the apartment building. He saw the apartment manager, a woman named Diane Williams. He grabbed her, forced his way into her apartment, and began to struggle with her. Her telephone rang, and she knocked it off the hook, screaming for help. This action scared Watts, and he ran away. Williams saw him get into a tan Pontiac Grand Prix car and drive off. The police were called about both attacks. They found a man matching the description stealing wood from the university campus. This man was Carl Watts. The police arrested him. Diane Williams and Lenore Nizaki both identified Watts in a police lineup as their attacker. He was charged with assault and battery for these two attacks. When police questioned him about the murder of Gloria Steele, he denied it. He said he was near her apartment the day before she was killed, but did not kill her. Police searched his home, but found no direct evidence linking him to Steele's murder. Watts eventually pleaded no contest to the assault charges, meaning he did not admit guilt, but would not fight the charges. He was sentenced to 1 year in a county jail. Psychologists who evaluated him during this time said he was very dangerous and showed no remorse. After his release from jail in 1976, Watts moved back to Inkster, Michigan, to live with his mother and stepfather. For a few years, he did not commit any known murders. He had a daughter with a childhood friend in 1979. He then married a woman named Valeria, but the marriage lasted only 6 months. His wife said he acted strangely. He would move furniture around in the middle of the night, chop up plants with knives, and disappear for hours after they were intimate. In late 1979, a series of murders began in the Detroit area. The killer attacked women on Sunday mornings around 4 a.m., leading newspapers to call him the Sunday morning slasher. The first of these was on October 31, 1979. A 44-year-old newspaper reporter named Jean Klein was walking home in the afternoon. She was attacked near her home and stabbed 11 times. Police did not find enough evidence to identify a suspect. The attacks continued in 1980. On April 20th, a 17-year-old high school student named Shirley Small was stabbed to death outside her home in Ann Arbor. On July 13th, a 26-year-old diner manager named Glenda Richmond was stabbed 28 times in front of her summer home. On September 14th, a 30-year-old graduate student named Rebecca Huff was found dead outside her house with about 50 stab wounds. Police found a connection in these cases and formed a task force to investigate the Sunday slashings. Watts began to come under suspicion. Police started to watch him sometimes. In October 1980, they believed he crossed the border into Canada and attacked a 20-year-old woman named Sandra Dalep outside her apartment in Windsor, Ontario. She survived but was severely injured. In November, a court allowed police to put a tracking device on Watts's car. On November 15, 1980, 2 police officers in Ann Arbor saw a man in a car slowly following a woman who was walking home. The woman tried to hide. The officers stopped the car for having expired license plates. The driver was Carl Watts. They searched his car and found woodworking tools and screwdrivers. They also found a dictionary that belonged to murder victim Rebecca Huff. Her name was carved into the cover. This was strong circumstantial evidence, but not enough to charge him with murder. He was only given a ticket for the traffic violation. Knowing he was under suspicion, Watts moved to Columbus, Texas, in the spring of 1981. He got a job with an oil company. On weekends, he would drive over 70 miles to Houston to look for victims. In Houston, his attacks continued. On April 16, 1982, he attacked a 32-year-old woman named Carrie Mae Jefferson as she returned home from work at the post office. He choked her, put her in the trunk of her own car, drove to a bayou, killed her, and buried her body. He then returned her car to her street. On May 23, 1982, he entered an apartment in Houston and attacked a 20-year-old woman named Michelle Mayday. He beat and choked her, then drowned her in a bathtub. Later the same day, he broke into another apartment where two roommates, Lori Lister, 21, and Melinda Aguilar, 18, lived. He attacked Lister outside and choked her. He then went inside and choked Aguilar. He tied her hands with wire. While he was focused on drowning Lister in the bathtub, Aguilar pretended to be unconscious. She then managed to escape by jumping out a window to get help. Neighbors called the police. Watts fled but was caught by police a short time later. After Carl Eugene Watts was captured in Houston in May 1982, he was held by the police. Investigators began to connect him to several recent killings and attacks on women in the Houston area. However, the prosecutors in Texas were not sure they had enough physical evidence to convict him of murder. The main evidence against him was the testimony of the surviving victims, Melinda Aguilar and Lori Lister. To solve this problem, the Harris County Assistant District Attorney, Ira Jones, made a deal with Watts. In exchange for a full confession to all his crimes, Watts would be charged only with the crime of burglary with intent to commit murder for the attack on Aguilar and Lister. He would receive immunity from prosecution for any murders he confessed to. This meant he could not be tried for those murders in Texas. Watts agreed to this plea bargain. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison for the burglary charge. As part of the deal, Watts led detectives to the buried bodies of 3 of his victims in Texas. He gave detailed confessions about a total of 19 attacks on women in Texas between 1981 and 1982. He admitted that 13 of those women died. He described how he killed them by stabbing, strangulation, and drowning. His confessed victims included Michelle Mayday, Carrie Mae Jefferson, and a 14-year-old girl named Emily Lakwa. He also confessed to the 1979 murder of Gene Klein in Detroit. However, Michigan authorities were not part of the Texas deal, so his confessions to murders in Michigan did not grant him immunity there. A few years after Watts began his 60-year sentence in Texas, a problem arose. A Texas court reviewed his case and made a new ruling. The court said that when Watts was sentenced, he was not formally informed that the bathtub water he used in an attempted drowning was considered a deadly weapon. This technicality changed his legal status from a violent felon to a nonviolent felon. Under Texas law at that time, nonviolent felons could earn good behavior credits. These credits allowed them to subtract 3 days from their sentence for every 1 day they served without causing trouble. Watts was a well-behaved prisoner. With these credits, his 60-year sentence could be shortened, making him eligible for release as early as May 2006. A public outcry caused Texas to change this law, but the change could not be applied to prisoners like Watts who were already sentenced. The possibility of Watts being released worried law enforcement in Michigan. In 2004, Michigan's Attorney General, Mike Cox, publicly asked for new information to convict Watts of murder in Michigan to keep him in prison for life. A man named Joseph Foy came forward. He said that on December 1, 1979, he saw a man kill a 36-year-old woman named Helen Dutcher in Westland, Michigan. Foy said he saw the man stab Dutcher 12 times. He had never forgotten the killer's eyes, which he described as evil and empty of emotion. When shown a photo lineup over 20 years later, Foy immediately identified Carl Watts as the man he saw. Based on this eyewitness testimony, Michigan prosecutors charged Watts with the murder of Helen Dutcher. Watts had no immunity agreement for this crime. At his 2004 trial, the judge allowed Watts's detailed Texas confessions to be presented as evidence to show his pattern of behavior. Joseph Foy testified clearly and identified Watts in the courtroom. The jury found Watts guilty of first-degree murder on November 17, 2004. On December 7th, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. With Watts now securely in prison for life in Michigan, authorities pursued another old case. In July 2007, Watts was put on trial in Kalamazoo, Michigan, for the 1974 murder of Gloria Steele, the Western Michigan University student. Again, his confessions were used as evidence. The jury found him guilty of this murder as well. On September 13, 2007, he received a second life sentence. Carl Eugene Watts was sent to a maximum security prison in Ionia, Michigan. He did not serve his life sentences for long. He had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. On September 21, 2007, just days after his final sentencing, he died from this illness in a prison hospital in Jackson, Michigan. Carl Eugene Watts died in prison, never having been a free man again after his arrest in 1982. Story 7. John Christie was born on April 8, 1899, in a town called Halifax in Yorkshire, England. He was the sixth child in a family of 7 children. His father was a stern and quiet man who designed carpets. His father showed little affection and often punished the children for small mistakes. John's mother and his older sisters were sometimes very kind to him and sometimes picked on him. When John was 12 years old, his grandfather died in their house after being sick for a long time. The grandfather's body was laid out on a table in the house. John later said that seeing his grandfather's body made him feel powerful and calm. The man he had been scared of was now just a corpse. John did well in school and won a scholarship to attend a better school. He was good at mathematics, history, and woodwork. Tests later showed he had a high intelligence. He sang in a church choir and was a Boy Scout. He left school in 1913 when he was 14 and got a job helping a movie projector operator. People who knew him as a boy later said he was a queer lad. This meant he was strange and kept to himself. He was not popular. As a teenager, he tried to have sex but failed. Other young people made fun of him for this and gave him cruel nicknames. He had this problem for the rest of his life. Most often, he could only have sex with prostitutes. Doctors later found that his body was normal. World War I began. John joined the British Army in 1916. He was sent to France in 1918. In June of that year, he was injured in a mustard gas attack. He spent a month in a hospital. He later claimed the gas made him blind and unable to speak for over 3 years. He also said it permanently damaged his voice, so he could only speak softly. However, no medical records support his story of blindness. Some people believe his quiet voice and his stories about the gas were a way to get attention and sympathy. He left the army in late 1919. He tried joining the Royal Air Force a few years later, but was discharged after less than a year. In May 1920, John Christie married a woman named Ethel Simpson. His problems with sex continued, and he still visited prostitutes. Early in the marriage, Ethel had a miscarriage. After 4 years, they separated. Ethel went to live with her family and worked in factories. John moved to London. For the next 10 years, while Ethel lived in Yorkshire, John was in and out of prison. His first crime was in 1921. He was working as a postman and stole some postal orders. He got 3 months in prison. In 1923, he was convicted for lying to get money and for violent behavior. He got probation. In 1924, he was convicted of theft twice and got more prison time. In 1929, he was living with a woman named Maud Cole. He hit her over the head with a cricket bat. A judge called it a murderous attack. He got 6 months of hard labor. In 1933, he was convicted of stealing a car and went back to prison. John was released from prison in early 1934. He and Ethel got back together. He stopped committing small crimes but still visited prostitutes. In 1937, they moved into a flat at 10 Rillington Place in London. The building was old and run down. All the people in the 3 flats shared one outdoor toilet. No flat had a bathroom. John got a job as a foreman at a cinema. When World War II began in 1939, he applied to become a War Reserve Constable, a type of temporary policeman. The police did not check his criminal record carefully. He got the job. While working at a police station, he began an affair with a married woman named Gladys Jones. The affair lasted until 1943 when the woman's husband, a soldier, came back from the war. The husband found John with his wife and beat him up. In August 1943, John Christie's wife Ethel was away visiting relatives. During this time, Christie met a 21-year-old Austrian woman named Ruth First. She worked in a munitions factory, but also sometimes worked as a prostitute. Christie invited her back to his flat at 10 Rillington Place. After they had sex, he suddenly strangled her with a piece of rope. He first hid her body under the floorboards in his living room. The next night, he buried her in the small, shared garden behind the house. He resigned from his job as a War Reserve Constable a few months later. In October 1944, Christie met a coworker named Muriel Eady. She suffered from bronchitis. Christie told her he had a special mixture that could cure her. He invited her to his flat. He had a jar with a tube in it. The jar contained Friar's balsam, a medicine with a strong smell. He told Edie to breathe from the tube. While her back was turned, he connected a second tube from the same jar to the gas pipe in the wall. As Edie breathed in the medicine, she also breathed in coal gas, which contained carbon monoxide. The gas made her unconscious. Christie then raped her and strangled her. He buried her body next to Ruth First in the garden. In 1948, a young couple named Timothy and Beryl Evans moved into the top-floor flat of 10 Rillington Place. They had a baby daughter named Geraldine. By late 1949, Beryl was pregnant again, but did not want another child. She spoke to Christie about it. Christie claimed he could perform an abortion. On November 8, 1949, he told Timothy Evans he would help Beryl. Later, Christie said the abortion went wrong and Beryl had died. He said he could arrange for the baby to be cared for. In reality, Christie had used his gas method on Beryl, strangled her, and also strangled the baby Geraldine. He wrapped Beryl's body in a blanket and a tablecloth. Timothy Evans was a simple man and believed Christie's story. Christie told him to leave London and to say his family had gone to the country. Evans did this but soon returned and went to the police. He first claimed Christie had killed his wife during a failed abortion. The police searched 10 Rillington Place. They did not search the wash house, a small outbuilding in the garden, very well. They did not dig up the garden. They found nothing. After more questioning, Evans changed his story and said he had killed his wife himself. The police then did a more thorough search. They found the bodies of Beryl and Geraldine in the wash house. Evans was put on trial for the murder of his daughter. John Christie was a key witness at the trial. Christie denied Evans's accusations. He gave detailed evidence about hearing the Evans couple argue. He did not tell the court about his criminal past. The jury believed Christie and found Evans guilty. Timothy Evans was hanged in March 1950. The police searches had been poor. They did not find the 2 skeletons in the garden. Christie's dog later dug up part of Muriel Eady's skeleton. Christie threw the skull into a bombed-out house nearby. After Evans was executed, Christie and his wife Ethel continued to live at 10 Rillington Place. New tenants, mainly from the West Indies, moved into the other flats. The Christies did not like them. In December 1952, Christie strangled his wife Ethel in their bed while she slept. After killing her, he needed money. He sold her wedding ring, her watch, and their furniture. He forged her signature to take money from her bank account. He told different neighbors different stories. He told some that Ethel was visiting relatives. He told others she had gone to Birmingham. Now living alone, Christie committed 3 more murders in early 1953. The victims were Kathleen Maloney, Rita Nelson, and Hectorina McLennan. Maloney was a prostitute. Nelson was a visitor from Belfast who was 6 months pregnant. McLennan was a woman he met in a cafe who was looking for a place to stay with her boyfriend. For these murders, Christie used a new method. He ran a rubber tube from the gas pipe in his kitchen wall. He kept the tube closed with a clip. He would invite a woman to sit in his kitchen. He would then release the clip, letting coal gas fill the room. When the woman became drowsy and unconscious from the gas, he would strangle her with a rope. He would rape them while they were unconscious or dying. After each murder, he placed a piece of cloth between the victim's legs. He wrapped each body in a blanket. He then needed a place to hide them. In his kitchen, there was a small, shallow alcove in the wall. It was like a very small cupboard. He put the bodies of these 3 women into this alcove. The space was so small the bodies were piled up. He then covered the alcove entrance with a piece of wallpaper to hide it. In March 1953, Christie had no job and no money. He decided to leave 10 Rillington Place. He fraudulently rented his flat to another couple, took their rent money, and left. He went to stay in a cheap lodging house. On March 24, 1953, the new tenant of the top-floor flat at 10 Rillington Place, a man named Beresford Brown, was in John Christie's old ground-floor flat. The landlord had let him use the kitchen. Brown wanted to put up a shelf for a radio. He tapped on the wall and noticed a hollow sound near a patch of wallpaper that looked different. He peeled back the wallpaper and discovered the hidden alcove. Inside, he saw the bodies of 3 women. He immediately called the police. The police identified the women as Kathleen Maloney, Rita Nelson, and Hectorina McLennan. They then searched the entire house and garden thoroughly. In the small garden, they dug and found 2 female skeletons buried there. These were later identified as Ruth First and Muriel Eady. In the flat, they found Ethel Christie's body under the floorboards in the front room. A citywide search for John Christie began. Pictures of him were in all the newspapers. After leaving his flat, Christie had stayed in a cheap boarding house for a few nights. When the news of the discovered bodies broke, he left and began wandering around London. He slept outdoors and spent his days in cafes and cinemas. He had little money and pawned his watch. On the morning of March 31st, a police officer named P.C. Thomas Ledger saw a man loitering near Putney Bridge. The man looked like the photos in the papers. Ledger approached him and asked his name. The man first gave a false name, but then admitted he was John Christie. When the officer searched him, he found an old newspaper clipping about the Timothy Evans case in Christie's pocket. Christie was arrested. At the police station, Christie was questioned. At first, he only admitted to killing the 3 women in the alcove and his wife Ethel. When the police told him about the skeletons found in the garden, he then confessed to killing Ruth First and Muriel Eady as well. Later, on April 27th, he also confessed to murdering Beryl Evans. He mostly denied killing baby Geraldine Evans, though he later hinted to a prison orderly that he might have done it. His full confessions explained how he used gas and strangulation. John Christie was put on trial in June 1953. He was tried only for the murder of his wife, Ethel, as this was the strongest case. During the trial, his defense lawyers argued he was insane. They called him mad as a March hare. A prison doctor, Dr. Matheson, testified for the prosecution. He said Christie had a hysterical personality and was a liar who craved sympathy, but he was not legally insane. The jury agreed with the prosecution. After a short deliberation, they found John Christie guilty of murder. The judge sentenced him to death by hanging. After the trial, an official inquiry was held to look into the case of Timothy Evans, as Christie's confessions meant Evans might have been innocent. Christie was interviewed for this inquiry. He maintained his story about killing Beryl Evans. The Home Secretary reviewed the case and decided there were no medical grounds to stop the execution. John Christie was hanged at Pentonville Prison on July 15, 1953. The same executioner who had hanged Timothy Evans carried out the execution. The controversy about Timothy Evans did not end. The first official inquiry had concluded Evans was still guilty, but public pressure and new questions led to a second, more thorough inquiry years later, in 1965. This second inquiry concluded that it was more probable than not that Timothy Evans had killed his wife Beryl, but that John Christie had almost certainly killed baby Geraldine. Because Evans had been tried and executed for killing Geraldine, this was a major miscarriage of justice. The report stated that if Evans had been retried, a jury could not have been sure of his guilt. Based on this conclusion, the British government granted Timothy Evans a posthumous pardon in 1966. His body was dug up from the prison grounds and given to his family for a proper burial. His case became one of the main reasons public opinion turned against the death penalty in Britain. Capital punishment for murder was suspended in 1965 and later abolished. In 2003, the government formally apologized and paid compensation to Evans's family, stating his conviction was wrongful. John Christie's crimes led to a change in British law and proved a grave injustice had been done. Story 8. George Joseph Smith was born in Bethnal Green, London, on January 11, 1872. His father sold insurance. The family was poor. When George was 9 years old, he was sent to a reformatory school in Gravesend, Kent. This type of school was for children who got into trouble with the law. He was sent there because he had started stealing things. After he left the reformatory, Smith did not change his behavior. As a young man, he continued to steal and commit fraud. Fraud means tricking people to get their money. In 1896, he was caught for a crime. He had persuaded a woman to steal money from the people she worked for. He used this stolen money to open a baker's shop in Leicester. For this crime, a judge sent him to prison for 1 year. In 1898, Smith used a false name. He called himself George Oliver Love. Under this name, he married a woman named Caroline Beatrice Thornhill in Leicester. This was his only legal marriage. They moved to London together. Caroline got jobs as a maid in big houses. While working, she would steal from her employers. She gave the stolen items and money to Smith. This was their way of living. Caroline was eventually caught stealing in Worthing, Sussex. She was sentenced to 12 months in prison. After she got out of prison, she told the police about her husband's crimes. Because of her information, Smith was arrested. In January 1901, he was sent to prison for 2 years. When he was released from prison, Caroline Thornhill was gone. She had moved to Canada to get away from him. After this, Smith began a new pattern. He started marrying women illegally. This is called bigamy. It means marrying someone when you are already legally married to someone else. His method was to find women who had some savings or property. In June 1908, he met a widow named Florence Wilson in Worthing. He married her. On July 3rd, he left her. Before he left, he took £30 from her savings account. He also sold all her belongings from their home in London. Then he disappeared. Just a few weeks later, in July 1908 in Bristol, he met a woman named Edith Peglar. She had answered an advertisement for a housekeeper. He married her too. Throughout his life, he would often leave Edith for months. He told her he was going to other cities to sell antiques. But he always returned to her when he needed a place to stay, and he usually had money with him. In October 1909, he used another false name, George Rose Smith, to marry a woman named Sarah Freeman. He did the same thing to her. He took all her savings and sold her war bonds. He got about £400 from her. Then he left. He did this over and over again. He married a woman named Bessie Mundy. He married a woman named Alice Burnham. In September 1914, he used the name Charles Oliver James to marry a woman named Alice Reed. In total, between 1908 and 1914, George Smith entered into 7 bigamous marriages. His habit was the same each time. He would marry a woman, take her money and sell her possessions, and then he would vanish. His life was a cycle of moving, using new names, finding new women, and taking their money. He left a trail of confused and robbed women behind him. Edith Peglar was the one woman he kept returning to, but she did not know about his other wives. After many years of stealing from women through fake marriages, George Smith's crimes became more severe. He began to plan not just to take his wives' money, but also their lives. This was done to collect money from life insurance policies he made them sign. The first known murder happened in 1912. The victim was Bessie Mundy. Smith had married her under the name Henry Williams. Bessie had some money held in a trust, which she could not access easily. When Smith realized this, he left her alone for 2 years. Then, by accident, he met her again in Weston-super-Mare in 1912. He convinced her to take him back. He told her they should go on a holiday to Herne Bay, a seaside town. In Herne Bay, Smith rented a house that did not have a bathtub. A few weeks after they arrived, he went to a shop and rented a bathtub to be delivered to the house. He also took Bessie to a local doctor named Frank French. Smith told the doctor that Bessie was having fits, like epileptic seizures. The doctor gave her some medicine for headaches. On July 12, 1912, Smith went to Dr. French early in the morning. He said his wife was having a very bad fit. The doctor came to the house and saw Bessie. He said he would return later. However, the next morning, Smith told the doctor that his wife was dead. Dr. French went to the house and found Bessie Mundy dead in the bathtub. Her head was under water, and her legs were straight with her feet sticking out of the water. The doctor saw no signs of a fight or violence. He believed she had an epileptic fit and drowned. A few days before she died, Smith had made Bessie write a will leaving all her money to him. He also made sure her life insurance policy named him as the beneficiary. After a quick inquest, her death was called an accident. Smith collected all her money, about £2,500, and left. The second murder happened in 1913. The victim was Alice Burnham, a nurse who had saved her own money. Smith married her in Southsea under his real name. Soon after the marriage, he took out a life insurance policy on Alice for £500. He also had her make a will in his favor. In December 1913, they went to Blackpool for a holiday. Smith went to a boarding house and specifically asked to see the bathroom and the bathtub before agreeing to rent a room. On December 12, 1913, Smith went to a local doctor's house. He said his wife was very sick. The doctor was busy and said he would come later. Smith then returned to the boarding house. Soon after, he called the landlady, saying something was wrong with his wife. The landlady went upstairs and found Alice Burnham dead in the bathtub. The police and a doctor were called. Again, there were no clear signs of violence. Alice's father was suspicious because of the insurance money, but the inquest ruled the death an accidental drowning. Smith collected the £500 insurance money and left Blackpool. The third murder happened in 1914. The victim was Margaret Lofty, a 38-year-old woman. Smith married her under the name John Lloyd. On the day of her death, December 18, 1914, he took Margaret to a lawyer's office. He made her write a will leaving everything to him. After that, he took her to her bank, where she took out all her savings. He also made sure a life insurance policy for £700, which she had signed before the wedding, was in order. He was the only beneficiary. That evening, they went to their rented rooms in Highgate, London. The landlady heard the sound of water splashing, and then someone playing hymns on the harmonium. Later, Smith came to find the landlady. He said, "I am afraid my wife is dead." The landlady went up and found Margaret Lloyd dead in the bathtub. A doctor was called. He saw a small bruise on her elbow, but no other signs of a struggle. Her death was also treated as a tragic accident at first. In each case, the method was the same. Smith married a woman with some money. He made sure she had a life insurance policy and it will benefiting him. He took her to a rented room with a bathtub. He then killed her in the bath, making it look like an accidental drowning. He used the confusion and the private setting to avoid immediate suspicion. After collecting the money, he would disappear and find a new victim. The crimes were discovered because of a letter and a newspaper article. In January 1915, a man named Joseph Crossley, who ran a boarding house in Blackpool, wrote to the Metropolitan Police in London. He wrote the letter for his wife and for Mr. Charles Burnham, who was Alice Burnham's father. They had read a newspaper report about the death of Margaret Lloyd in London. They thought the details were very similar to the death of Alice Burnham in their own boarding house the previous year. They sent the police the newspaper cuttings about both deaths and asked for an investigation. The case was given to Detective Inspector Arthur Neal. He first went to the house in Highgate where Margaret Lloyd had died. He looked at the bathtub. It was very small. He found it hard to believe a grown woman could accidentally drown in it. He then spoke to the doctor who had examined Margaret Lloyd's body. The doctor mentioned a small bruise on her elbow, but nothing else. Detective Neal then learned important facts. He found out that on the very day she died, Margaret Lloyd had made a will leaving everything to her husband and had taken all her money from the bank. He also discovered she had a life insurance policy for £700, with her husband as the beneficiary. At the same time, Neal asked the Blackpool police for their file on Alice Burnham's death. He learned that her case was identical: a new will, a life insurance policy, and a bathtub death soon after marriage. Neal now believed the same man was responsible for both deaths. He told the doctor to delay sending the insurance report for Margaret Lloyd. He hoped the killer would contact the lawyer to ask about the insurance money. Police watched the lawyer's office. On February 1st, 1915, a man came to the lawyer's office. Detective Neal approached him and asked if he was John Lloyd, Margaret's husband. The man said yes. Neal then asked if he was also George Smith. The man denied it angrily. Neal arrested him on suspicion of bigamy. At the police station, the man finally admitted he was George Joseph Smith. The police now needed to prove murder. They had 3 similar deaths, but no clear proof of how the women were killed. The famous pathologist Bernard Spilsbury was brought in to examine the bodies. The bodies of Margaret Lloyd and Bessie Mundy were dug up for examination. Spilsbury found very little evidence of drowning and no signs of poison or disease. The only injuries were tiny marks on the skin. He decided the deaths were not natural. He believed the women had been killed suddenly in the bath, but he needed to figure out how. Spilsbury had the bathtubs from all 3 crimes brought to London. He also studied the women's heights and the tub's lengths. He had a theory. He thought that Smith waited until the woman was in the bath. Then, he would quickly grab her feet and pull them up. This would make the woman's head and shoulders slide underwater very fast. The sudden rush of water into her nose and throat would cause immediate unconsciousness and death. This would explain why there were no signs of a struggle. To test this, Detective Neal hired women who were similar in size to the victims. They were experienced divers. In a police station, with doctors present, they recreated the crime. When Neal tried to hold a woman underwater by force, she fought back, leaving clear signs of a struggle. But when he surprised one of the women by quickly pulling her feet up, her head went underwater before she could react. She lost consciousness immediately and almost drowned. This experiment proved Spilsbury's theory was correct. It showed how Smith could murder the women without leaving obvious marks. Meanwhile, after news reports called the case the Brides in the Bath murders, police in Herne Bay contacted Neal. They remembered the suspicious death of Bessie Mundy in 1912. They identified Smith from a photograph as the husband, Henry Williams. This connected all three murders to one man. George Joseph Smith was charged with the murders of Bessie Mundy, Alice Burnham, and Margaret Lloyd. His trial began at the Old Bailey on June 22, 1915. In court, the prosecution showed the clear pattern of his actions: marriage, insurance, will, then a Bath death. The evidence from all three cases was used together to prove his plan. Smith's lawyer argued this was unfair, but the judge allowed it. Smith chose not to speak in his own defense. The jury took only 20 minutes to find him guilty of murder. He was sentenced to death. His lawyer appealed the verdict, but the appeal was rejected. George Joseph Smith was hanged at Maidstone Prison on August 13, 1915. The money he had stolen was gone, spent on his own needs. The victims' families were left with their loss. The case set a legal precedent, allowing evidence of a repeated pattern of behavior to be used in court to prove guilt. The case of the Brides in the Bath murders was closed. Story 9. Stephen Port was born in a town called Southend-on-Sea, on the east coast of England. When he was just a baby, his family moved to a place called Dagenham, which is in East London. This is where he grew up. His parents continued to live in the family home there for many years. During his time at school, Stephen was often alone. He was described as a loner. Other children bullied him. His teachers remembered him as a quiet boy who did not talk much. Even as a grown man, people who lived near him noticed he acted in ways that seemed childish. For example, he would sometimes play with toys meant for young children. After he finished school at age 16, Stephen went to an art college. However, his parents could not afford the costs for very long. He left the art college and then spent 2 years learning how to be a chef. Cooking was the job he would do for most of his adult life. Stephen lived with his parents in their house until he was in his early 30s. This is older than when many people move out. He then got his own flat in an area called Barking, not far from where he grew up. He worked as a chef in the kitchen of a bus depot in West Ham. He once appeared briefly on a television cooking competition show. In his personal life, Stephen did not have many romantic relationships when he was young. One person he dated said he acted in a childish way, and that was why they ended the relationship. When he was in his middle 20s, Stephen told people he was gay. As an adult, Stephen took care of his appearance. He went to the gym regularly and had an athletic build. He had lost all the hair on his head. He was very self-conscious about being bald. To hide it, he wore a blonde hairpiece, which is also called a toupee. It was fixed on professionally so it looked real. Wearing this hairpiece made him feel more confident when he went out to meet other men. Stephen Port used gay dating websites and phone apps to meet other men. He created different profiles on these sites. On these profiles, he told lies about himself. He sometimes said he was a special needs teacher. Other times, he claimed he had gone to Oxford University or that he had been in the Royal Navy. These lies made him seem more interesting or trustworthy to the people he contacted. Port was interested in using drugs during sex. He himself used drugs like poppers, mephedrone, and crystal meth. But he had a particular interest in a powerful sedative drug called GHB. He would give this drug to the men he met without them knowing. He would put it in their drinks. This is called drugging someone. The drug would make them unconscious or unable to move or say no. Port would then rape them while they were helpless. In June 2014, Port contacted a 23-year-old man named Anthony Walgate. Anthony was a fashion student who also sometimes worked as an escort. Port pretended to be a client wanting to pay for Anthony's services. Anthony went to Port's flat in Barking. There, Port gave Anthony a drink containing GHB. After Anthony was drugged and raped, Port gave him a very high second dose of the drug. This dose was fatal, meaning it killed him. Anthony Walgate died from an overdose of GHB in Port's flat. The next morning, Port carried Anthony's body out of his flat and left it on the street outside the building. He then used a phone to call for an ambulance, but he did not give his name. He pretended to be just a passerby who found the body. When police arrived, Port gave them a false story about what happened. He was later charged and found guilty of lying to the police, which is called perverting the course of justice. For this, he spent a few months in prison and was released with an electronic tag on his ankle. The police did not at this time discover that he had murdered Anthony. After being released, Port continued to use dating apps. In August 2014, he met a 22-year-old man named Gabriel Kovari. Gabriel had recently moved to London from another country. He stayed with Port for a short time. Port gave Gabriel GHB, raped him, and then gave him a fatal overdose. Port then needed to get rid of the body. He wrapped Gabriel's body in a bedsheet. He waited until night, then dragged the body a short distance to a nearby church graveyard. He left the body there, propped against a gravestone. 2 weeks later, in September 2014, Port met a 21-year-old chef named Daniel Whitworth. Again, Port drugged Daniel with GHB, raped him, and killed him with an overdose. Port took Daniel's body to the same church graveyard. He placed it in almost the exact same spot as Gabriel's body. This time, Port left a typed note near the body. The note was written to look like a suicide note from Daniel. The fake note said that Daniel had accidentally given a fatal drug to Gabriel and was killing himself out of guilt. Port put a small bottle of liquid GBL, which the body converts to GHB, next to the body to make the scene look believable. A full year passed. In September 2015, Port met a 25-year-old forklift driver named Jack Taylor. Jack lived with his parents in Dagenham. Port followed the same method. He invited Jack to his flat, drugged him with GHB, raped him, and murdered him with an overdose. Port then moved Jack's body. He did not take it to the graveyard this time, but left it in a park right next to the churchyard. During this whole period, from June 2014 to September 2015, the bodies of 4 young men were found in a very small area around Port's flat and the church. The police did not connect these deaths. They treated the first 3 as not suspicious, believing they were just accidental drug overdoses or, in Daniel's case, a suicide. They accepted the fake suicide note as real. The families of the victims were told their sons had likely died from drug use, even though some families insisted their sons did not take drugs. When one family member found news articles about the other deaths and called the police to suggest a link, the police told them the cases were not connected. The sister of Jack Taylor, the last victim, refused to accept the police's initial explanation that her brother's death was a simple drug overdose. She knew he was strongly against drugs. 11 days after Jack's death, she called the police for an update and was shocked to learn there was no active investigation. She and another sister began their own research online. They quickly discovered news reports about the 3 other young men found dead in the same small area near the churchyard over the previous year. They immediately contacted the police again to report this possible link. Faced with the family's pressure, the police finally agreed to look more closely. They reviewed CCTV footage from near the churchyard on the night Jack Taylor died. The footage did not show Jack walking alone, as would be expected in a suicide. Instead, it showed him with an unidentified older man. The Taylor sisters demanded that the police release an image of this man to the public to identify him. The police were reluctant, but agreed. Within 2 days of the image being published, Stephen Port was identified by members of the public. Police arrested Port at his flat on October 15, 2015. A major investigation began. Police searched Port's flat and his computer and phone. They found evidence of his many dating app profiles and his searches for drugs. Most crucially, they found a receipt for the bed sheet used to wrap Gabriel Kovari's body. They also found the exact brand of notepaper used for the fake suicide note left with Daniel Whitworth. Forensic tests showed Port's DNA on the bottle of GBL left with Daniel's body. The police also re-examined the deaths of Anthony Walgate, Gabriel Kovari, and Daniel Whitworth with the new knowledge of Port's methods. Port was charged with the murders of all 4 men. At his trial at the Old Bailey Court in London in 2016, the prosecution presented evidence from the 13-month period when Port killed the 4 victims. They showed he had a pattern of meeting young men online, luring them to his flat, drugging them with GHB to rape them, and then killing them with overdoses. The jury also heard from several other men who Port had drugged and raped, but who had survived. These men testified about waking up confused and ill after being with Port. On November 23, 2016, the jury found Stephen Port guilty of all 4 murders. He was also convicted of multiple rapes and of administering poisonous substances to numerous victims. On November 25th, the judge sentenced him to life in prison. He stated that Port's crimes were so serious that he should never be released. This is called a whole life order. Port was sent to a high-security prison called Belmarsh. After the trial, a major investigation was launched into how the police had handled the cases. The Independent Office for Police Conduct looked into the actions of the Metropolitan Police. It was found that opportunities to stop Port after his first murder were missed. Different police teams had treated each death as separate and unconnected, even though they happened close together and in similar ways. The families of the victims received financial compensation from the police force in 2022 because of these investigative failures. A fresh inquest into the 4 deaths was also held to officially establish the facts. Stephen Port remains in prison for the rest of his life, while inquiries into police conduct during the initial investigations continue.